Hello, and welcome into another episode of the Viva Albertos podcast. Today is going to be a little bit of a different episode, only because this has all been quite a new, experience and journey for me here at Viva Albertos. Not used to having to, have to cut and record audio and video at the same time. So this has all been kind of a working process, and thankfully my internet has found a time of stability for me to be able to record what I can for all of you great listeners and watchers, consumers, if you will, of this week's episode. So this week we're going to talk about the Brendan Donovan trade that just went down, the Cardinals claiming Bryan Ramos off of waivers, and then we will get into a couple of your reader mailbag questions that we had asked for this week from you guys. You guys always do such a great job of coming through for us on that. So thankfully, the fellas did, whenever we first tried to record this episode the first time, thankfully the fellas really came through for me and, pushed through and answered a couple of the questions that I was able to salvage some of the stuff from that. So we'll throw that in there as well. So do our best to answer your questions and have, some sort of formative answer for you on that. But, kind of pivoting from that into our first topic, we will go ahead and talk about Donovan trade. This past week, the St. Louis Cardinals sent second baseman, utility player, all-star Brendan Donovan to the Seattle Mariners. And, first and foremost, you want to say thank you to Brendan Donovan and all he did in a Cardinals uniform, and just how much of a pleasure and a joy it was to watch him do his thing for the Cardinals. And, obviously the leadership aspects of everything, you can't really put, a weight on how much that really meant to the team, as well as like the on-field performance. It's pretty hard to replicate. Even if it was a little bit heavy in the platoon splits, it's hard to replicate a 150 WRC plus type bat from the left-hand side. And so from that aspect, I think that the Cardinals are clearly going to be worse on and off the field because of that decision in 2026. Now, whenever you look at the next part of this deal, look at what the Cardinals were able to get in return, like a Durangelo Sanger. They were able to get Ty Pete, Colton Ledbetter, and then two comp picks at spots 68 and 72 in this year's upcoming draft, and that gives the Cardinals the second largest bonus pool to operate off of going into the 2026 draft. So as the Cardinals farm system continues to rise and grow in its stature, it will allow the Cardinals to really further emphasize that process, as in 2026 we expect to see some graduations from that list, like a JJ Weatherholt and a couple others in that top 10. So where players are going to continue to ascend and graduate out of that, the Cardinals will have now set it up to where there's this nice middle, and you will have those young players that were either just drafted or are about to be drafted kind of coming up behind it to create that next wave, that next level behind the one that's already kind of being created here now. So for the Cardinals, I really like the addition of Sanger. From the right side, he's plus on both the fastball and the slider. If you listen to Wednesday with Walton and Reese, Kyle Reese talked about how, the changeup from the right side is a pitch that has some really interesting specs to it. It's just a pitch that he hasn't thrown a ton of because of the switch, the ambidextrous pitching. And if the Cardinals, are really dead set on allowing him to continue to do that, it will kind of only, unfortunately, hinder his performance from the right side and the amount of time that he can take to focus on becoming, what he could really be from the right side with a mid to upper 90s fastball, a really good tight slider that really gets some good swing and miss, and then again that changeup that has some interesting specs to it. But obviously not a lot of right-handers throw right on right changeups as kind of their go-to, unless that changeup is truly their bread and butter pitch, which for Senja, being a left-handed pitcher on top of being a right-handed pitcher at the same time, really is no need to have to do that. So, if the Cardinals, like the Mariners, were going to do and commit to Senja as a right-handed only option, I think that's twofold. I think that will improve what is already a really strong, profile. And, the second part of that it will just continue to refine and enhance what is already a really strong, solid foundation. Now, if Senja is dead set on continuing to pitch from the left side, then it's his career and his choice. And if that's what he wants to continue to do, that's great. But his future as a potential mid-rotation / fringe all-star-ish type, if you project forward, that's kind of what I see as a number 2 or 3 starter in the big leagues for Senja. If he ever wants to, if he has hopes of kind of, reaching that ceiling and that potential for what I see for him, then, focusing in game on just being a right-handed pitcher is probably what would be best for his future. Now, looking at Ty Pete, the second piece coming over, there are a lot of people in the Cardinals content creation space that are trying to comp it a lot to like what it was for Josh Baez the year start of 2025, and I think that's fair, because when you Ty Pete is a couple inches shorter than Josh Baez, but when you look at the raw tools and the raw ability, both guys, are that 4 to 5 tool outfield type players. Ty Pete originally drafted as a shortstop, so that the athleticism is really strong there, and moving down the defensive spectrum is only going to make those high athleticism type tools play up. And I think that for the Cardinals, it's you've already proven that you can take that profile like a Josh Baez and make certain adjustments with either approach or end zone swing decisions or quality of contact, those types of things, and you continue to invest in Ty Pete in those types of things and see if you're able to kind of recreate what you were able to do with the Josh Baez. And then if you have 2 of those guys, and Ty Pete does have the capabilities of potentially sticking in center field, for the long term, if those of you who aren't sold on Victor Scott as your everyday center fielder because you're just not sure that he's going to hit enough. I mean, not that Ty Pete is really like JJ Weatherholt level safe in terms of like his floor as a bat, but when you look at the upside and the potential, if you're really not sold on what Victor Scott is going to do from an offensive standpoint, and you don't think that he's, a starting outfield caliber player, then, you're kind of rooting for Ty Pete to make those similar offensive adjustments and improvements that you saw from a Josh Baez this year. So, moving down the list next, the Cardinals were able to get from the Tampa Bay Rays. They were the third team involved in this deal. They were able to get Colton Ledbetter and then a comp pick from them as well. And I think that it's important to note that the Cardinals are taking these swings on players that have a certain amount of upside. Like they clearly had interest in the draft, in Ledbetter's draft year, in drafting him and acquiring him. Those are a couple things I've heard from other people who kind of followed the draft a little bit closer than I did the past couple of years, and there was some reported interest in Ledbetter pre-draft, and so the Cardinals clearly have identified something in his skill set and talent that made him an appealing option. So good, decent raw power from the left side, and then he's kind of been waffling back and forth on approaches and things of that nature. And so it'll be really interesting to see what the Cardinals kind of emphasize for him, as he probably will be in Double-A this year. So interesting to see what he looks like in Springfield for the Springfield Cardinals this year. And from the left side, power and speed are probably his 2 main calling cards. So just it's just another number. So like if you're throwing numbers at it, when you're looking at the current Cardinals outfield situation and you're kind of hesitating and questioning kind of, what the future direction of the Cardinals outfield might be. Colton Ledbetter certainly would add to that, like Chase Davis, Zach Levinson, that kind of group of guys. Juan Ben Cho is another name that's kind of like in that second tier of outfield prospects that may ascend to the major leagues and make a debut, and maybe perhaps will find a certain role with the team going forward. Now, the final piece of this for the Cardinals in return, they were able to get, a comp pick from both Seattle and Tampa Bay. Again, really boosting that pool of money to go after some really high upside talent that might fall through the draft. So the Cardinals have their first pick at 13th, and they also have their first competitive balance A pick at spot number 32, I believe, is what's been reported. I don't know if that's necessarily been finalized yet, or how that is intending to work out going forward. But I think that, for the Cardinals, getting that additional draft capital and being able to use that and really target some high upside at that 32 spot for a couple of players who might have first round grades that might fall out because there might be signability concerns or what have you. The Cardinals will be right there, ready to be opportunistic, ready to go above slot to get whoever might fall who has that really high potential upside and ceiling at that spot. And so I think for the Cardinals, it's hard to say, because at the initial outset of the offseason, I really thought that you needed to get some sort of major league pitching piece back in return for Brendan Donovan at this point. But what I did not foresee at the beginning of the offseason was them, being able to move Sonny Gray, move Wilson Contreras, get them to waive their no-trade clauses, and then also get major league pitching back in return for those guys. So it did kind of change the calculus of the situation, of the context of the situation, and kind of in my mind too, as Donovan kind of became the last real major thing that the Cardinals decided to check off in their offseason, it allowed them to just kind of pursue the best possible, like, high upside reward for long-term vision, essentially. And so when you think about what the Cardinals were able to accomplish in this trade and get in return for Brendan Donovan, and the long-term benefits it could potentially have for the organization, it really is a terrific return for the Cardinals. And once again, it's just really sad to see Brendan Donovan go. Moving on to our next topic, pop up here. The Cardinals claimed third baseman Bryan Ramos off of waivers from the Baltimore Orioles, and this is a move that's probably going to go really under the radar for pretty much mostly all Cardinals fans that don't follow the team really that closely. Like, obviously, there are some Cardinals fans who live, breathe, and die with this team, and that's terrific. And I hope this podcast is one that, really speaks to you and is for you in that way. Bryan Ramos, former top prospect for the Chicago White Sox, has, when digging into kind of what he is and what he brings to the table, some pretty good right-handed pull side power. He does have a little bit of a weakness up in the zone, up and away against fastballs, as displayed by his hot and cold zones. You can find that information at prospectsavant.com. Give them a quick shout out, because they do terrific work over there, and we really enjoy reading them and talking about their stuff as well. And then you kind of also look at, what he's able to do against certain pitches, and it appears that he really has success against breaking balls and sinkers. So he really is able to feast on pitches middle and low in the zone. And so if the Cardinals are able to help him, perhaps kind of either close up that hole in his swing at the top of the zone, or find a way to effectively fight it off until he can get to a pitch he can really do something with, perhaps the Cardinals might have something. But again, I've seen some fans kind of overreacting to, this is crap. This is a low hanging fruit, classic Cardinals of yesteryear move. And it's like, no, it cost them nothing to acquire Bryan Ramos. It cost them nothing to give him a shot in spring training to go out and show something. I mean, you look at what, like, Taylor Motter or Jose Barrero or Ryan Valade of the last couple seasons have brought to the table. I think that Bryan Ramos has more upside than those guys did, and more intrigue for me as far as like what he would be able to bring to the table. And also another, piece of this aside, he's the same age as Jordan Walker and JJ Weatherholt, so he also fits kind of that timeline. Now, the one drawback to this is the fact that the White Sox have already exhausted all of Ramos's options, and so obviously the Cardinals have a lack of flexibility with Ramos. But again, if he's able to kind of capture lightning in a bottle in spring and really impress with some raw data to the Cardinals, perhaps that is a place where perhaps he'll battle with like Fermin and Sajaci and maybe even Pozo for that right-handed option off the bench. The Cardinals are still said to be seeking some right-handed options. Jeff Jones of the Belleville News-Democrat, who we plan to have on next week, said on Twitter, made mention that Randall Grichuk is still a name that is on the table and being discussed. I will have a piece coming out on Tuesday discussing 5 names that I believe are somewhat blocked on their respective major league rosters, and they all come with high upside and control and great intrigue. Now, I don't know what particular the cost would be in terms of player acquisition going the other way, but they fit the mold of kind of what I think the Cardinals are looking for, and they're all interesting. They all have exciting traits. They would all be right-handed options. And assuming that, Lars Nootbaar might not be ready for opening day, or even if he is limited whenever his availability is for opening day and he's only capable of being, a DH to start the season, and the Cardinals decide to, slow roll him into the season, that need for a left fielder, somebody who can capably play that every day until, Nootbaar is able to come back more healthfully and play on a more regular basis, might be something that the Cardinals can look into. Now, I know that there are some within the fan base that would like to champion Nathan Church or Jose Fermin or maybe Thomas Sajaci, or give Bryan Ramos this opportunity in left field, which he's never really played in an extended run at the major league level. I would prefer to have somebody who's a little more adept to playing the position, who also brings some real immense upside to them. And so from that perspective, I think that I would like to see the Cardinals continue to pursue an actual established outfield type player, and maybe not necessarily established in terms of what they've accomplished at the big league level, but established in terms of their prospect pedigree, their ability to play the position with a certain amount of proficiency, not just kind of shoehorning these players out of position into that space just because we kind of need it to happen there. So I think from that perspective, I would still like to see the Cardinals continue to pursue that right-handed bat. Once again, I want to thank Gabe and Scott for kind of pushing through and being able to answer a couple of your reader mailbag questions, and I want to go ahead and answer a couple of my own, just so that way nobody feels like they were neglected or passed over. I'll run through these really quickly, and then I will throw it over to Gabe and Scott and kind of allow you to hear their thoughts on the couple questions that they answered. They also kind of combined a couple answers just for the sake of getting through that process, as we were having a lot of technical difficulties trying to get this episode up and running. So again, your patience are appreciated. We do apologize that this hasn't quite been up to the standards that we had established over the previous year, but again, with change, sometimes certain things don't go as expected. So on to your reader mailbag questions. This was something that the boys had kind of combined, and I'll kind of answer it quickly and give my quick thoughts on it. Cool Noodles asks over under 75 wins in 2026. My over under is probably like I'm right there in that range, and I think you're kind of like weighting it properly. I think that 70 to 75 wins is probably about where this team lands. Now, they did, like Scott and Gabe, you'll be able to hear in a little bit, did, kind of hedge a little bit that number has come down to like 69 and a half, I believe, at certain various bookkeeping sites. And so if that's the case, I'll take the over on that. But if the true number is like 75 and a half, I might lean the under on that. I think the Cardinals will end up somewhere in the 70 to 75 win range. I don't see this team as a team that's going to like have the bottom completely fall out from underneath them. I don't think that they're a 100-loss team. I think that when you look at the rotation with, Liberatore and McGreevy and, the potential additions of like a Hunter Dobbins and a Richard Fitz, and Palante has in the past had some success, and you include the upside of like a Dustin May. I think that there is a certain floor to this team that regardless will hit its mark. And so I think that, looking forward, I think that 70 to 75 is a pretty safe bet. And I still think there's enough offensive talent that will be playing on a regular basis for the Cardinals that they will be able to scratch out 70 to 75 wins. Zubin asked the question on Herrera. What are your minimum expectations for Herrera for him to earn starting catching spot? What does he need to do to keep it? I'm sorry, Zubin, I don't have any quantitative numbers. The boys did reference like caught stealing percentages. That's obviously like the linchpin of the conversation for Herrera sticking at catcher. Obviously, his framing numbers, his blocking numbers, those all grade out fairly well. It's the big question remains in his arm and its ability to throw out runners. You cannot have a catcher behind the plate who just will allow willingly, without like really any type of defensible counter to the run game. You can't have a catcher behind the plate who can't throw runners out. That just does not work. And when you have other options like a Pedro Pajes, like a Jimmy Crooks, like a Joel Pozo on his way, like a minor league Gold Glove catcher like Leo Bernal, if he can't do it, if he can't throw runners out of the position, that's okay. Because that kind of leads into Zubin's second question. If he can't stick at catcher, what would you do with him? I think he has plenty enough athleticism to play left field. And I think that, we know that his bat is good enough to DH on days that he's not playing the field. And so I think that you start him out in left field because that's a little bit higher on the defensive spectrum than just first base. And if he doesn't quite seem to find a comfort zone in left field, you can always transition him over to first base. The bat will play from that position plenty fine. He has enough athleticism. I think that he would be able to, transition to first base just as well if left field doesn't work out. But, you want to start him like the same argument goes for like whenever the teams draft shortstops and the top of the round, and you're sitting there going like, we already have Mason Wynn, why are we drafting another shortstop? We have 6 shortstops in the minor leagues. It's because the shortstop, center field, like these guys are the top of the spectrum when it comes to like athleticism and ability. You look at every college and high school team, generally the shortstop is the best player on the field for those teams, and so that's kind of the idea. And once they ascend, from single A, double A, triple A, as they ascend up towards the major leagues, and if their athleticism or ability to play kind of isn't able to allow them to kind of stick at that premium position, you would prefer, like the scouting philosophy is you would prefer that they be able to kind of work their way down the defensive spectrum a little bit and kind of settle into, a defensive home if they aren't able to stick at shortstop or center field. So like if a center fielder doesn't quite have the speed or range to play center, but still has plenty enough athleticism, you kind of move him to a corner and he's fine. Same thing with a shortstop. If he's not quite good enough to be a shortstop, think of Brendan Donovan, for example. Probably not ideal as a shortstop. Could play there in a pinch, but he's much more adept at playing second base or third base. So you move down that defensive spectrum just a little bit, and you still get a pretty decent value of defender from those positions. I know that Donovan's numbers defensively probably didn't show it very well this year, but again, we have to also add in the context that he was playing hurt and injured through parts of the season, which probably did lean into those defensive metrics looking worse than probably what they realistically were. Moving on to next question, Kyle MSS. Now that Bloom has basically cleared out the trade candidates from the roster, will he start doing some bargain shopping in free agency? Kyle lists some kind of, 1-year deal type players: Zach Littell, Lucas Giolito, Ramon Urias. Don't think that's a fit. Chris Paddock, I had talked about him in the past. I think the Cardinals have plenty enough starting pitching depth, so I don't think that they're going to attack Littell, Giolito, Chris Paddock, though he does interest me. Griffin Canning, I think he's going to find a better opportunity somewhere else. Gary Sanchez, I really don't understand that one at all. Luis Rengifo, maybe, just kind of depends on how the Cardinals feel about him playing the outfield, I guess. And then Michael Kopech is a name that I had talked about, throughout during the off season, and I think that there would be, a space for him to. The thing is, he would conflict with like Ryan Stanek. The Cardinals already have that veteran right-handed arm to slot into the bullpen that they kind of are looking to flip at the deadline. I would have thought that Michael Kopech would be a great option there. I also kind of thought that it'd be interesting to try to see if they could Michael Kopech put him back in the rotation, but they opted to go with Dustin May, who's probably a little bit safer of a bet on that range than what Kopech is. But that's neither here nor there. So to answer your question, they're hunting for a right-handed bat, in free agency and potentially on the trade market. But pretty much all of the guys that you listed, I don't think that they have that's where their focus is or interested in. Silent George, what would a successful 2026 season look like? I realize the canned answer is World Series title, but let's be realistic. Yes, let's be realistic. I think that a successful season for the Cardinals in 2026 is probably all the young players, and I realize this is like a cop-out answer, but all of the young players taking positive steps forward. We want to see offensive growth from a Mason Wynn, from a Victor Scott, from a Jordan Walker, from a Nolan Gorman. We want to see these guys take positive steps forward. We want to see if Herrera can stick behind the plate. We want to see if J.J. Weatherholt can establish himself as, it seems a pretty foregone that it's going to happen, that he's going to be given everyday second base opportunities and establish himself as a potential Rookie of the Year candidate. You hope that he gets through the season healthy and is able to establish himself in that way. And you kind of look towards the future, 2027, 2028, and perhaps some of these guys answer the questions as to who these players are going to be a part of that next core going forward to the next contention, the next window of contention for the St. Louis Cardinals. So my honest answer and kind of the cop-out answer is as much young forward progress as possible this season would be the measure of success. If players just kind of stagnate or take steps back, that's where I will say the season was a disappointment or a failure. Talking about JJ Weatherholt, question from Huey RVA: what are true expectations for JJ this season? What constitutes success for JJ in 2026? Again, just establishing himself, just getting through the season healthy. There's no reason for him to really push for, being an MVP, but can he establish himself as an everyday regular? Can you reliably put him in the lineup every single day and just kind of, set it and forget it? Can you put JJ in the lineup and just kind of let him go out there and do his thing and not really have to worry about it, or him and Ha about where he is in the lineup? Can he establish himself in that way? I think that's really where I'm looking at. I don't want to put numbers on him, and I know he'll tell you the same thing. He doesn't want to put he doesn't look into that kind of stuff. It's he evaluates himself on his process and his ability to do things in a way that really allows him to have as much success as possible through in terms of his process that allows him to have the results that he does. And so I don't want to put numbers on it. I don't want to say if he hits 280 with 30 home runs and drives in 100 RBIs, that's a successful season for JJ Weatherholt. No, I just want him to come into the season and get through the season healthy, and really we're like, everyone's pre-expectations come true, and he's the second base for the future. There was no reason to ever worry about him. He is what he is supposed to be, and then let him build on that as young players tend to do throughout their careers. District of Cardinals, given who's on the 40-man, who's going to be the first starter up when needed and the first reliever to ride the Memphis shuttle up to St. Louis? This is a fun question because I think that it lends a little bit to kind of how we see the spring training battles kind of coming down. And I think that, there are like seven pitchers who kind of project to be starters, and excuse me, I think that it is very possible that perhaps Hunter Dobbins winds up being kind of the odd man out in this situation. And if you go over and listen to, we had Tyler Gettinger on here, Redbird Farmhands, and their show, they had Hunter Dobbins on, and it was a terrific interview. I highly suggest, if you haven't already, to go check that out and listen to it. It's great. And Hunter said on the show that his body is not able to handle the rigors of being a reliever, and so he is pretty much just a starting pitcher only. And obviously coming off of the ACL tear coming back this season, if the Cardinals decide to kind of slow play him, want to start the season in AAA, and then kind of see what opportunities might open up through the first couple months of the season, maybe he kind of takes on that Michael McGreevy role, where he's like ready to be the first man up. Matthews kind of in that conversation, but I think that he still has a little bit to prove in AAA. Was that second half spurt, kind of him getting back on track, or was that just the aberration? So Quinn Matthews has a little bit to answer for, and then I think later on in the season you'll have guys like Eshawn Henderson and Bryson Motts, and perhaps potentially even Pete Hansen, who will be knocking on the door if all things go right for them in the first half. There might be some opportunities for one of those guys to ascend as well. I don't think the Cardinals are going to be in any hurry or rush to get Liam Doyle to the major leagues. That's why I'm less confident that you'll see him in St. Louis in 2026, but more shocking things have occurred in the past, so not putting it past him. Reliever to ride the Memphis shuttle up to St. Louis. I mean, think about the fringe pitchers who are on that 40-man roster. Andre Gurnier, Ryan Fernandez, Chris Roycroft, Nick Riquet. Those are all names that I think that Scott and Gabe kind of mentioned and talked about. Those guys would probably be Gordon Graceffo is another one. So those are kind of, you might later in the season see a Luis Gastelum or an Austin Love. So there are all kinds of options that might fall into that bucket. You just kind of never know. But it'll be interesting to watch kind of as the season unfolds. Definitely something I'll want to track. And then I'll finish up with this question, and then I'll throw it over to the guys, and you can kind of hear their thoughts and their questions on this episode, on what they think for these reader mailbag questions. This last question comes to us from Schmidthead. Newt Barr is most likely going to lead off if and when he is healthy, so kind of back to what I was talking about earlier. This question is who is going to lead off if he isn't healthy and to start the season. Weatherholt seems like the most obvious likely candidate, followed by Wynn and dark horse candidate Scott if he shows any improvement in his hitting. I think that's a pretty accurate way to weight those, and I think that's probably right in line with where I'm thinking that, and I think that the Cardinals are thinking about it as well. I think if Newt Barr's not ready for opening day and he's going to start the season on the injured list, I don't see any reason why Weatherholt wouldn't be given that opportunity. I recognize that the Cardinals have in the past been a little more hesitant to put that much on a young player, but I think for Weatherholt, he's kind of in a class of his own, and I think that kind of a challenge would be something that he would embrace, and I think that he would fit perfectly in that leadoff role in 2026. So if manager Ollie Marmol thought that that was the best case scenario to put him in the leadoff spot, I would have no qualms about it to start the season. Mason Wynn and Victor Scott. Mason Wynn isn't the highest OBP guy, so he's not exactly the most ideal fit for the leadoff spot. I know that traditional baseball types will tell you that shortstops are prototypical leadoff hitters, and that's kind of where they hit. And yeah, but they also have to have, modern baseball tells you that you want your best on-base guys at the top of the lineup, and Mason Wynn isn't necessarily that. And honestly, Mason Wynn has a little bit better of an ability to drive in runs and do kind of the situational hitting better than I think that he's given credit for. I don't necessarily think the numbers will bear that out, to be honest with you, just from my recollection of what I remember watching him take at bats. And so I think that Mason Wynn probably fits better further down in the lineup with more RBI opportunities. And then Victor Scott, I think we can only operate off of what we've seen so far, and he's kind of that prototypical 9-hole hitter, speed defense, kind of gets on base occasionally. When he does, he causes havoc for the top of the lineup and to drive him in. If he shows any more type of offensive acumen going into the 2026 season, I think that you could definitely give it more consideration. That would be really fun at the top of the lineup. I don't think that he's ever going to be necessarily like Ricky Henderson, but I think that he does have the moxie and the self-confidence that, you know, if and when he gets on base, he's taking that next base, and he's going to do whatever it takes to help his team win. And I really enjoy watching Victor Scott go about his business and you know, do his thing on a daily basis. And I think that his ability to really allow his tools, what he does do really well, to shine. And I think that he seems very motivated and driven to improve on what he accomplished last year offensively, which I get that some people would be like, well, that really wasn't a whole lot. Yeah, well, you know, sometimes things happen, and we know that development isn't always a linear process. And so I think that we will see a better, you know, Victor Scott from an overall perspective in 2026 than we have seen in seasons past, because I think that he's more ready for it now.
I'm glad that it got done. There was talk about waiting until the deadline, that there was no real rush to try to get it done. We talked about it a couple weeks ago about how that value and what the return could be would possibly change in a good or a bad way if they waited until the deadline. But I think they made the right move as far as dealing him now. Once, you know, the other veterans went, it made little sense to hold on to Donovan, and it really does clear the way for what the lineup is going to look like, at least coming into spring training, and creating that opportunity pretty much throughout the roster. So the return, selfish plug, talked about it on Cardinals on My Time. I had Redbird Farmhands and Aiden Gray from Redbirds on the Arch, and then I also had a contributor from the Tampa Bay Rays side to break down the Colton Ledbetter prospect that they received. And it was kind of interesting because we never really heard about the Rays, and then it was like, hey, they wanted to get rid of Ben Williamson, but the Cardinals are like, we don't, Ben Williamson was part of it, and Cardinals like, we don't really have a need for them. So then it's like, hey, let's see what the Rays want to do, and then turned it into Colton Ledbetter for the Cardinals. So I think overall, those three plus the comp picks is a phenomenal get for Donovan.
Yeah, I would say that people who wanted more, I feel like it would be tough to get more, just because Donovan is like a pretty good player. I don't think he's a star, and it's hard to get a better top prospect than Durangelo. I'm only going to say his first name because I'm not going to attempt his last name. But I think him, yeah, I'll get there eventually, but I'm not. Today's not that day. But because him being the best prospect makes sense to me, and he is maybe a slightly more exciting prospect than people would give credit for, because his numbers are a little bit dampened by his numbers against as a left-handed pitcher. If you just look at his numbers as a right-handed pitcher, they're actually like very good. That's why he was promoted to Double-A, I believe, even though his high numbers are not particularly impressive. And then the other two guys I kind of consider more wild cards. One of them, two very different kind of wild cards. Ledbetter is close to the majors. Nothing in his stats really excites me that much, but you know, you never know. And then Pete is more of the like rookie ball lottery card than somebody who's close to the majors. Even though he was in high A, he was not very good in high A. And yeah, I mean, I don't think we would have done better at the deadline. So I think they were absolutely right to trade him now. So I'm pretty.
That's George asked what a successful 2026 season would look like, and Cool Noodles put the over-under wins at 75, so I kind of want to put those together. Gabe, over-under 75 wins. If under is, how can they be successful?
Well, first I want to say 75 wins is a much better over-under than the line Vegas is doing, which is what, like 70 wins?
And it went down to 69.5 once Donovan got traded, I saw.
I mean, I'm not a betting man, but I feel like I need to get in on that because I just don't feel like they're going to lose that many games. I feel like when you're like that uncertain about the win, like when you get a good number, or you're like, I don't know, under's safer because they will probably sell at the deadline.
Hmm.
Although, what would they sell that would significantly impact the win total? I guess would be the Romero. I mean, yeah, he would, but like enough to change your thing from 77 wins to 73. Um, I'll be optimistic Cardinals fan. I'll go over. And then the successful Cardinal season this year, I think, has almost nothing to do with wins and losses. It has to do with individual performance. Certainly, a breakout from Jordan Walker would be a success. JJ Weatherholt having a successful rookie season. Um, hopefully, a Mason Wynn extension, honestly,
Hmm.
at some point. And I would say Joshua Baez emerging,
Cool.
being more of a sure thing would certainly. It's individual things. Not everything is going to individually work out, but as long as like I don't know, 4, 5, 6 things like where you're like, oh, this is great for the future. I would consider that a success. But and I can't pinpoint any one specific thing. But I'll be focusing on individual players more than how the Cardinals do in the standings.
I agree. I mean, they even told us we knew that wins weren't the measuring stick for this year, but 69.5 is crazy. We talked about it from the beginning that what they subtracted from a 78 win season is that a 9 win difference. I don't know. 75 I think is a great number for Cool Noodles. I'll say 76 because I think that's a good number, but 75 I think is probably what's likely. A successful season, same type of thing. I think we just need answers on at least 2/3 of the lineup. We're talking Gorman, we're talking Walker, we're talking doesn't need to be an answer at this point, but Victor Scott, we need to have some type of like idea of which way he's trending. Someone like Thomas DeJacy, what is his role going to be? Is Burleson putting on that power? Where's Herrera going to be? Like those are kind of the ones that I think that we can answer throughout this year. That whichever positive or negative that we see, a successful season will having an answer to help with that direction that we're going to. And then since I mentioned Herrera, question from Zubin. What are your minimum expectations for Herrera for him to earn the starting catcher spot? What does he need to do to keep it? And if he can't keep it, where would you put him?
Well, he needs to. I don't know what the percentage is, but like he needs to reach a certain percentage of catching runners. It can't be as bad as it's been. It can be below average. Like it could be clearly below average, but it just can't be like literally anybody can run off him at any time because that's just not workable. And the other tricky thing is, I think he's okay at the other parts of the game. I don't know how he is at managing the staff for like the intangible pitchers pitch better when he's pitching or pitch worse when he's pitching. I don't know how he does at that. So behind the curtain, the team will probably be able to look at that kind of thing and determine if pitchers are like fine with pitching with him or whatever. But yeah, the main thing for me is just because this is what I can see is how well he does at catching runners, how well his arm improves, and like I said, it just needs to get to below average because his offense will play.
Hmm.
But yeah, it can't be literally any old schlub can steal off him because that's just not going to work.
Yeah, I think the stolen base percentage against is going to improve anyway because when you look at who players were running against last year, it was Eric Fetty, Miles Michaelis, people like that. Maybe guys that throw 95 instead of 92 is going to help. And then we'll see what it is as far as his arm surgery went. And we still haven't really seen if he's gotten cleared yet, as far as I know. But that'll be definitely something that we keep an eye on. If he can't stick at catcher, I hate doing DH for 25-year-olds. So I think he's athletic enough. We saw his ability to run the bases and that kind of stuff to where he could potentially get some time in the outfield. But is that something that you want him to learn at the big league level? I think this year it's either catcher or DH, and then whichever way he goes this year will determine his next year plan at this time. What do you think about
And
that, Gabe?
yeah, no, I agree. And also, given I mean, as of now, outfield situation, ideally, if he can't stick a catcher longer term, he could play the outfield because we could use a bat in the outfield. And Baez might change that, and maybe Walker breaks out, and a lot of things can happen to change that equation. But right now, I mean, you could almost make an argument we could use Herrera in the outfield more now than
Mm-hmm.
the catcher. But I don't think Crooks is ready, so I'm okay with trying him a catcher for now. But yeah, no, I would like for him to be in the outfield. I just don't know how much the Cardinals believe in how his defense will play and how much his, I guess, injury issues will hold up there.
Hmm.
But I agree with you that DH and catcher is probably where he's stuck this year because you don't want him to learn on the fly in the major league level.
Yeah, and I mentioned that in my article on Sunday this week too. Like, I'm sick of, hey, just have him learn first base, have him learn left field. It's like, so,
Yeah.
you said that with Walker, and then now you talk about, not you, obviously, Gabe. I'm talking the royal you. Hey, he can figure it out. He can figure it out, and then it's learning the major league level as also learning the stuff on defense. So, let's finish it up with two questions regarding the bullpen and just pitching in general. What do you think like the last couple spots of the Memphis Shuttle are going to look like? So who's going to crack the roster? That's just we'll see him for a blowout for 2 or 3 innings, then send him back down, see him 10 days later. And then what do you think about the closer situation? So that's summarizing questions from District of Cardinals and London Bird. So Memphis Shuttle, what are we looking at? And then closer by committee, or who do we see closing?
Well, the Memphis Shuttle is right now the bullpen has quite a few, not quite a few, but it has a decent amount of guys that cannot be sent down, which is Stanek, Justin Brule, Matt Pushard, Jojo Romero, Riley O'Brien. None of those guys can get sent down. I think Swanson is maybe entered the stage where he's, if he continues pitching like he did last year, is too good to send down. So it's pretty much Ryan Fernandez, Gordon Graceffo, let me see the other guys. Andre Granillo, Chris Roycraft, and Nick Roquette. Maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I'm surprised he's made it this far, but I would assume that those guys will be cycled through because they haven't really, quote unquote, proven themselves yet. And you literally can't send down the other guys. In addition to them, I'd say we might see some Austin Love and Luis Gastelum, but it's hard to say who will be the 2 men out without knowing who's going to make the roster. And all of those guys could make the roster who are on the 40 man, I would assume. I don't think anybody out of the 40 man will make the opening day roster. Maybe Packy Naughton, though, if he's healthy.
He's back.
I'm a Packy Naughton believer. I'm really rooting for that guy. Yeah, I think he signed a 2-year deal last year because he was going to be injured most of the year. And I don't know what his health status is right now, but he was a pretty good pitcher when he was at the major league level. So I wouldn't mind seeing him there if he can return to what he was doing, certainly. And then
Nice.
I'd say the obvious pick for closer is Jojo Romero, which would also have the effect of boosting his trade deadline value, I assume.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you want to give some spots, some situations to Riley O'Brien and Matt Swanson, just both for experience reasons and also like maybe it's 3 right-handed hitters and
Mm-hmm.
so they might mix and match a little bit, but it'd probably be better for Romero to have a decent amount of saves racked up when August 2nd rolls around. I was gonna say July 31st, but for some reason they're doing August 2nd.
Yeah, moving it a little bit. Fangraphs surprisingly put Riley O'Brien as the closer based on their roster resource. They projected him at 16 saves to Romero with 14, and then Swanson with 6. I think that's just because Romero's kind of that only lefty in the bullpen right now. So like seeing those save opportunities as well as with the team winning 69 and a half games, are there going to be that many save opportunities available? I've been talking about if Swanson should be the closer or if he should be the Leahy guy. It's looking like the Leahy guy is probably the best for him right now. They don't want to pigeonhole him as the closer possibly, and Riley O'Brien kind of has that more closer makeup, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think you're exactly right. The Memphis Shuttle is going to be the same that we've been seeing. Chris Rycroft, I think we're going to see those guys recycled because there hasn't been any additions or real subtractions from the 40 man for the relievers. But I'll keep an eye on Tink Hence to see what they want to do. I'm just going to not give up on him just yet, but he could be, there's no reason to not start his clock if he's ready. Let's just get him up there if he's ready. Let's finish up. Gabe, do you got any last second wish list items before we get ready to go to spring training?
Right-handed outfielder. It's kind of looking like for that to be a good wish, though, it almost has to be a trade or something. I mean, right now the favorite is, I guess, Randall Grichuk, which is not necessarily ideal, but I know I saw people like not wanting to get an outfielder because they have plenty of people to play, but like plenty of people to play is like playing infielders in the outfield, really.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so I would just They keep saying they're going to sign one or get an outfielder. So I assume the options are just like I don't know who is left besides what Grichuk and is there anybody because they got Anhar signed, Bader signed,
Hayes
Hayes.
signed. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, are we just it's pretty much just
Luis
Grichuk.
Rengifo, I think I saw, but I don't think he's. Yeah.
Is Willie Castro? I know somebody's been pushing that. I
No,
don't know if
they signed him. He got I think he got a 2-year deal with Pittsburgh. Maybe
he signed with
Pittsburgh.
the Rockies. It looks like actually.
Rockies. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
good for him. He might be might really benefit from that.
I am a
Oh,
Castro guy.
yeah, he signed 2 years, 12.8 million.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, no, that's pretty much all. Because everything else is like I think the guys who we have need to play, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else. Like, because we're not trying to compete, so it's not like I mean, we are trying to compete, but we're not. It's not our number one goal.
Yeah, and as of right now, it's Lars Nootbaar left. As of right now, it could change 12 times before that. So I think Nelson Velasquez is probably going to get a good opportunity in spring training. I believe he's playing in the WBC as well, so maybe there's some opportunity to see him check out in like those bigger spots. But I think the opportunity to add a worthwhile name as a righty bat, like you said, is going to have to come by a trade because the free agent market is really, really kind of barren at this point. So for our fearless leader, Jake Wood, who we're going to have to make sure that he is, staying happy and positive as we love him leading the charge here at the Viva Alberto's podcast. Gabe Simons, appreciate you joining and sticking along with this. So the STL Cards fan 4, and then Scott Plaza, Mr. Plastastic 17.
Okay. Big thank you to those guys once again for jumping in and answering those questions. I do appreciate you guys sticking with us, and this will hopefully only continue to get better as we go on. I was able to get through this whole episode without any major technical issues, and so thank you guys for sticking through it with us. And next week we are going to attempt to try to have Jeff Jones of the Belleville News Democrat on with us to answer some questions. He's boots on the ground down in Jupiter, Florida, as pitchers and catchers report for spring training and all the early arrivals for the WBC and the guys getting their early work in. So from that perspective, until next week, for Scott Plaza, Mr. Plastastic, for Gabe Simons, the STL Cards fan 4, and for me, Jake Wood at Woodbat28, we will talk to you all next week. Thanks for listening to the Viva Alberto's podcast.